Jennefer, welcome to an intimate conversation with women of color. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Deneen. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. And you know what? I have to say, I was going to ask, what's the weather like today in New York?
Thankfully, it is sunny. The snow is melting. It's like a pre-taste of spring.
I know.
We had like 3 or 4 snowstorms in about 10 days, and it was so gloomy and it was so gray. And it was just like, oh, but now today it's just beautifully sunny. And I'm so excited because tomorrow I am scheduled to get my vaccine shot.
Ah,
Yes. And so I've just been watching the weather like a hawk, and so far so good.
awesome. Yeah. And so what made me ask is I looked up and I'm looking out my window and in looking at how the snow has melted, reflecting on how this morning it was like 50 degrees. And I'm like, 50 degrees? Are you kidding me? Let me
Amazing.
rush
It's
home and turn the
amazing.
heat off.
Slap on that bikini and the
Okay.
suntan oil.
No, and so I opened up the back door just to get some fresh air in. So,
Hmm.
but yeah.
Can't wait. March, some people are like, oh no, March. But the way I look at March is that it's the beginning of spring,
Hmm.
and daylight savings, we get that hour back. So that is my focus.
Well, very good, very good. And so hopefully the weather, remains nice for you tomorrow to go get your shop. And so good for you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's introduce you to our listeners. So this week's guest is Jennefer Witter. She is the CEO and founder of the Boreland Group, Inc. Jennefer is a 30 plus year PR veteran who is very good at getting her clients their unfair share of attention from their target audiences. Jennefer, tell us more about you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me on your program. I've been listening to it and I've been enjoying the episodes. And as for myself, yes, I have been in public relations. I started the Boreland Group 18 years ago, which is
Wow.
hard to believe. And before that, I had been in PR in different agencies. And I left Ketchum Public Relations, where I headed their high tech division. And in my first year of doing that, I generated $1 million worth of revenue. And I decided to go out on my own because I had taken a year off between Ketchum and starting the Boreland Group. It was like a sabbatical. And I decided to go back into the work world under my own terms. So with the Boreland Group, we focus primarily on minority and women-led companies. And we do everything from social media to media relations to writing press releases, articles, op-eds. And we also are very committed to women because I feel that I've gotten so much that I need to give it back. So in addition to doing the Borland Group, I'm very active in my community and I volunteer with a couple of groups. One is Women in Power, which is an organization that works with senior level women and that gets them to the C-suite. And I also serve on the board at the 92nd Street Y, their advisory board for this award called Extraordinary Women. And basically, what it is women who are making social change through their work. I also mentor a lot of women. And then back into the work world, I'm a published author of the Little Book of Big PR, which was published by HarperCollins. And I'm a fairly active public speaker. And I've been speaking now since about 2008. And I have spoken at venues such as the Pentagon, the Brookings Institution, TEDx, and Brown Brothers Harriman, a whole plethora. Again, a lot of them are general business audiences, but there is a nice subset of women-led organizations that I speak to. And the topics that I address, Kelsey Priest, the one that's been the most popular within the past year, has been on implicit bias. And because with implicit bias, there has been such a great deal of interest in it, I'm basically self-taught on unconscious bias. So within the past 6 months, I went back to school. I went to Cornell University for their online class and I got certified in diversity and inclusion. And what I thought was really wonderful is that everything that I self-taught was validated by the classes that I took. And I also learned a great deal from the classes. And so it was just a wonderful learning experience. And I also speak on topics such as virtual networking, personal branding, thought leadership. So I do a cornucopia of things under the Boreland Group, but they all are threaded through with giving back, sharing knowledge, and helping others. Because I think, again, that that's very important, that what we have, we give back.
Yeah, awesome. That was amazing. So congratulations on your certification.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was excited about it too.
Right. And then also the validation, right? You know, you mentioned being self-taught, you were already doing the work, then you go through this program and find out that, yeah, you were on track and now you have, you know,
Yes,
certification just to say that, you know, you were already
yes,
doing it.
yes,
And now
yes.
you have that certification to add to your resume and to your bio. So good
Yes,
for you.
absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm a Virgo and we research and we pull our, sleeves up and do it. And I knew that I was on the right track, but just seeing it from Cornell, it
Yes.
was just so wonderful to get that again, that confirmation that what I was sharing was right on point.
Yeah. And so the first thing that you said, and I'm like, oh, let me write that down under my own terms. I love that. I love that. I want to talk a little bit more about that. But before going there, you know, you've already talked about so much of what you're doing for others. The focus is women. You talked about the minorities and whatnot. And so, why is it important for women of color to have a platform to use their voices?
Who else is going to do it for us? If we don't do it, we can't expect anybody else to lead the flag. I've been working for a long time. I've been working since the early 1980s. So we're talking about 40 plus years, give or take. And I have to say that in public relations is a predominantly white industry. And back in the 80s, they didn't have anything like mentoring or networking or personal branding. And in public relations, I was usually one of the only Black executives in the organization. And when I was with my clients, and they were all over the country, I was usually the only Black senior level person in the room. So I think that for women of color, we have to work together to support ourselves. We have to be there for each other because while I've been fortunate to have, some mentors, most of the ladders that I have climbed have been under my own power. And I look back and I do wish, and it's not with regret, but I do wish there was somebody there who could have given me the time and energy to say, go right instead of going left, or just hearing me out in an objective manner and giving me that advice. So with women of color, we need, like with Minda Hart, with her wonderful book, and I listened to your interview with her. I'm a fangirl too.
Right.
I had the memo and I was underlining it and everything, that we have a particular set of challenges and obstacles that other women do not. And it's like going to another Black woman and saying, this, and then having the other woman automatically understand. With my implicit bias trainings, I say, listen to what we have to say, because in the past it was overlooked or discounted. And now it has come out that it wasn't in our mind, that we weren't exaggerating, that the microaggressions being left behind in terms of promotion. What our parents always said is that you have to work harder and jump higher just to get noticed. It's all true. And now people are finally beginning to see it, but we can't get lazy. We can't get lax. We have to be there with our elbows and arms tied around each other to make sure that this momentum continues and it doesn't just peter out.
Absolutely, because this is a time, and you know, you mentioned the conversation with Minda. And that was part of what we talked about as well, right? Is that this is
Yes.
our time and we have to stay on top of
Yes.
it, right? We have to continue to use our voices. We have to amplify our sisters. And, and
Yes.
that's part of how we were connected. So you and I, we have a social media relationship. We have a relationship on
Yes.
Twitter before we actually met, which is now. But that support of one another, right? The
Yes.
retweeting and commenting, and those are the type of
Yes.
things that you can do for one another. That's easy. That's one
Mhm.
way of using your voice.
Mhm.
And so you talked about the personal branding, you talked about the various topics that you speak on, and again, a lot of your work, which is very impressive. So,
Thank you.
very, very impressive. But how else are you using your voice for women of color?
Hmm. Well, I try to advocate, as I was saying earlier, is that we don't go, farther or further without amplificating throughout the amplification of others.
Hmm.
Yes, I have to make sure that I get my message out. Because I need to keep the business going. I need to keep generating the revenue. But what I want to do and what I do is that if I see opportunities within my universe, I will say, hey, Minda, hey, Deneen, here's an opportunity that you can take advantage of. If I see a speaking engagement, I will send it to you and say, hey, fill it out. With the women that I mentor, I would say that 90% of them are women of color. And we have regular phone calls. And I tell them, I am here for you. You don't have to wait for our scheduled calls. You can call me beforehand if you need to speak to me right away. And all of these women are younger women. And I feel it's important to bring the generation behind me. They're not in their 20s. There's some in their 30s. Some of them are in their 40s. But again, I want to make the road smoother. And if my past experience allows them to have an easier journey, or if my knowledge can help them move forward in their professional lives, I am there for them to take what I have and utilize it in the way that benefits them the best.
Yeah, and it. And so what's interesting is you said it, and I actually was on a panel earlier and kind of brought it up. The question was asked when we were younger, who were our like role models? And I had never considered that before. And at the time they asked the question, I said, well, I don't know that I had role models when I was younger, but looking at how I operate, how I move through life, it's representative of how my dad lived. So my dad was an entrepreneur, and so I have that spirit,
Mhm.
and but I didn't have any people that anybody else I could point to. And you kind of just said that. And so it is important. And that's part of why this podcast is so important, is to be able to do that, right? To be
Mhm.
able to elevate the voices, to be able to hear from you and to share and to pour, and then to reach those women who don't yet recognize the power of their voices, that they have them. And so thinking about that, and when I say using your voice, that could be speaking. So public
Yes.
speaking, it could be writing, it could be dancing, whatever the expression. I just, for me, it's a catch-all as to using your voice as your expression of yourself. So for
Mhm.
those women who don't recognize their power, perhaps some of the women, when they first came to you as mentees, what do
Mhm.
you tell them? What is it that you say to them to pour into them to
Mhm.
help them to recognize that they do have
You
power?
know, a lot of women don't realize just how much power they have, and we have. And the age that am is not like I was like this when I was 20, 25 years old. And I have said that, there were some really difficult situations that I was going through in work that kind of beat the enthusiasm out of me,
Mm,
that really flattened me. And at times, losing my self esteem and confidence. And so, with finding your voice, what I always say to these women is that no one will know how great you are until you tell them.
right?
Okay. Yes. You just can't go around saying, oh, I'm great to myself. You're not going to get very far. But you also have to say it with conviction. You can't like have the body language with the slumped shoulders and speaking with a soft voice. You really have to believe in yourself. The other thing is that women, we have a tendency, and I speak in broad brush statements, is that
Mhm.
we see what we don't have as opposed to what we do have. And so what we need to do is to look at what we have and build upon it, because we will always have the things that we're not good at. Everybody has something they're not good at. But what are you good at? And how can you make it unique to yourself? And this is a phrase from Minda Harts. And she goes, comparison is a theft of joy. So do not compare yourself to another person, because this is another saying that I share with the young women. If you compare yourself to other people, you're either higher than they are or
Mm.
lower than they are. You're never on the equal stage. And then the other thing is that you have to keep educating yourself, whether it's through a certification program, whether it's through a free course, because knowledge and technology is changing rapidly and you have to stay valid. And so you have to have that educational background that continues to meet the fluidity of the moment. And then last but not least, because I'm a very shy person naturally, and it took me years and years to speak up in meetings. And I can't begin to tell you how many people would say, Jennefer, you don't talk in meetings, you don't talk in meetings. And it's like, oh, but your voice has to be heard, because if you don't speak, nobody is going to know the great ideas that you have. Nobody is going to know how creative you are. And when you speak in front of a room, you're showcasing your expertise and you have an opportunity to impress people. You know what? If you make a mistake, so what? We all make mistakes. If I have like a minute, I'm going to tell you a
Mm.
mistake that I made, and it was 20 years ago, and it still stays with me, obviously. And I was working at Ketchum, and I was helping to launch an online travel service. And I was a support person, and the lead was another account executive, et cetera, et cetera. And I was brought in because I had the tech background. And they're there talking with the owner of the service. And in my mind, I kept saying, ask the question, what happens if the website crashes? And I was so hesitant about asking the question because I didn't want to be wrong,
Mm.
looked at like, why are you asking that question? What a stupid question, you know? Well, I learned a stupid question is a question that is not asked, because I never asked it. And the next day, when it was the launch, guess what happened?
It crashed.
It crashed. It crashed. Okay. And I could have been the star, you know, even if I
Right?
didn't answer the question, I could have been the one to ask that question. Are you prepared to work the site if it crashes? I didn't ask. I didn't ask. So don't be me in
Yeah.
that respect. You know, go out there and ask the question. And if you're around professionals, they're not going to say, oh, Jennefer, that's a stupid question. If they do ask it, then they are stupid people. All right. You go forward and in your confidence, even if you have to fake it, you ask those questions, you are there with the facts, and you will be known as the person who has a forceful, intelligent point of view.
Yeah. And so the second point that you mentioned about, people seeing what you have, um, and telling who you are and all of that, the fear of not speaking up and whatnot. It reminded me of the poem. I think it's by Marianne Williamson. And it was the one that was recited in Aquila the Bee. And it was
I read
about,
the
and what really stood out is it's not that we have a fear of failure, we have a fear of being great.
really,
Yes. And that stood with me because I'm like, you know what? You're right. It's not about failing. We've seen that. We know what that looks like. It's what we don't know, which is what does greatness look like?
That is so interesting because the way I look at it is that you learn from your mistakes, and you have to have a mistake every now and then to learn
Yeah,
more. So I think by taking your thinking and my thinking and combining them together, that women will be even stronger with both of these tools, knowing they can make a mistake and they should never ever fear being great. Because what's wrong with being great?
absolutely. Absolutely. And also with that lesson, as far as with that failure, like you didn't ask that question, but you learned, and you're here to tell me about it today. And in
Mhm.
telling me, you're telling our listeners, right? But
Yeah.
had you not had that experience, you wouldn't have that thing to share, and you wouldn't have that lesson for other people on journeys to say, hey, ask that question that you have, go ahead and do it. And if you fall, okay, get up,
Yeah.
learn, like, don't do that again, or do it differently, so that you can
Yes.
keep moving and get on the side of greatness. Yeah,
Oh,
that's awesome. So I've incorporated also to ask about deferred dreams, and I get that from my sister,
yeah.
author and poet Soul True, who wrote
Mhm.
Deferred Dreams, and she wrote other memoirs and poetry.
Mhm.
But deferred dreams is basically delaying a dream. Was there ever a time that you delayed a dream, and if so, what did you do, or how did you handle it?
Delaying a dream, the I've been thinking about that. And for me, for most of my life, I've been a workaholic. And I worked
Yeah.
to the expense of my personal life. And I would say for all people, no matter what age you are, do not put work ahead of your personal life, because my deferred dream was to have more of a personal, a fuller, richer life. Now, I'm not playing a tiny violin. I'm certainly not sitting home petting 10,000.
Right.
Uh, but what I have, found that in this age of isolation,
Yes.
I should have been more focused on creating more relationships.
Yeah.
And so, what I would share with your listeners is, don't put work ahead of anything, because work will always be there. It will
Hmm.
always be there. But having a good friend, and I treasure my girlfriend hive, that they will be there through thick, through thin, through Zoom calls, and to grow it and to nourish it, because work is not the be all and the end all. And when we draw our last breath, we are not going to be thinking about that great email that got us the promotion. We're not going to be thinking
Yeah.
it at
No,
all.
absolutely not. And you're so right. I mean, definitely one thing from COVID is relationships. Is
Yeah.
that, if you didn't have them, you missed them, you wish that you had. If you have them, you're missing being with the persons, but you can always pick up the phone, Zoom, other FaceTime, whatnot. But yeah, it's very key, relationships. And I was actually talking about that earlier and saying that that is key in a lot, just life in general, even in a workplace. It's key to
Yeah.
have relationships, because I say that it's who you know for sure, but it's
Mhm.
also who knows you. And so we've kind of talked about that, and a lot of the points that you've made is about that, right? Is about putting yourself out there so that people get to know you and what you bring to the table, your worth, and all of that. So that's powerful. So I'm going to ask a bonus question, and then I want to go back to this um, under my own terms. So the bonus question is, and it's because it's still February, and when your episode publishes on Friday, it will still be February, which
Okay.
is Black History Month, and also when we celebrated Valentine's Day. So just thinking about that Black History Month. Um, who in history epitomizes Black love for you?
I'm going to be very traditional. And what I love about the Obamas, Cal surprise, is that they have been very honest about their relationship, and that they had some really hard times, before he ascended to the presidency. And what has held them through is that they were always there for each other. They always worked through their issues, and they had each other's back. and they
Mhm.
became a true partnership, not with a fairy tale and the rose-colored glasses, but a love based on a friendship and respect that transcends the color of their skins. But I also think that it's important to have that Black love out there because there is so much implicit bias. There is so much incorrect thinking about the structure of Black couples, like, Black women, can't find marriage or dates or anything like that, which is all poppycock. I think that for me, for Black loves, Michelle and Barack Obama are the epitome of that in a very down to earth way.
Yes, and I agree with you because, as a matter of fact, when I kicked it off on LinkedIn, that was the couple. So it was Ossie Davis and Ruby
Yeah.
D, as well as the Obamas. And as you were talking just now, I was thinking, how they'd say for women, oh, your standards are high and whatever, we'll try this and try that. And, some women probably shy away from it because they look at it as settling. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe a different way of looking at it, and a good example are the Obamas, because Michelle was ahead, right? She was
He
she
was
was the
his boss.
boss. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was the boss.
She was
I think that,
primary wage earner for quite some time.
yes, right, for a very long time. I think the difference is in where that is a great example is because, yes, however, it was obvious in him that he was going places, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had drive, he had goals. So he
Yeah.
was working towards something. So I think that in that respect, that's something that is easier to take than
Mm-hmm.
maybe in a situation where it's, yeah, just go and get this person just because, and
Yeah.
that's why a lot of women probably shy away from it. But I think if we think about the Obamas and we look at it that way, think about it that way, then
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yes, yes. Again, it was a very non-traditional marriage for a long time. And, she was his boss, he was the intern. He picked her up in that ratty car and she was
With
like, oh.
the hole in
Yes, exactly.
Flintstone type car.
It was just like, well, that's lovely.
Right?
You know?
But she
You
rolled
know,
with him.
yes. The struggles they had to conceive their children, to have their children. And I remember hearing what he said was that when she was holding Sasha in the hospital, that she looked at him seething because he had been away so often and she felt that she was a single
Single
parent and
mom,
that's
yeah.
not what she signed up for. But there was still that friendship based on love and based on mutual respect and a want for the other. So, that's real,
Yeah.
and that's what I appreciate. None of this fairy tale. The moment I start hearing, oh, I love you, and all that on Facebook and whatnot, I'm like, you know, keep it
Absolutely.
real. And that's what the
Absolutely.
Obamas are doing.
So as we begin to wrap up, like I said, I want to kind of go back to under my own terms. And so that is probably going to be the title of our conversation. So
Okay.
talk more about under my own terms as we wrap up.
Okay, well, under my own terms, for me, when I had left Ketchum and I had taken that sabbatical, it was also because I was exhausted.
Yeah.
PR is a very hard field. It is not Sex in the City, Samantha, where you had cosmopolitans and you woke up at noon. It is a grind. I mean, that wasn't my PR. Okay.
Right?
And it's a grinding, exhausting, stressful field. And when I was thinking about going back into it after my year off, I wanted to create a nurturing environment where I liked and respected my clients. I
Mm.
wanted to create an environment where my staff would know that I was always on their side, that they were more important to me than the client, and that I was there for them. And so with the Boreland Group, we call ourselves our work family. And we have been through so many things together. I mean, not just the pandemic, but the Great Recession. There have been births. We've lost our parents. There have been moves. And we all just get together. Like when my father passed away, I didn't even expect it. All of them came to his funeral and they sat through the entire ceremony. And that to me was priceless,
Yes.
priceless. So, under my own terms, meant that I was not going to be pushed around by anyone. I was not going to be given an account where the person was unlikable or I disagreed with the thrust of the account. I would not go into a place of employment and not like my boss or not respect the individual for a lack of talent. There was not going to be internal politics or anything like that. So, under my own terms, reflects how I wanted to create an environment. Yes, that is professional. I'm not their parents, I'm not their sister or anything like that,
Right.
but one where it was a place where they felt comfortable, where they enjoyed the work, where they were challenged, and they knew that they were secure. That's what I mean.
I love that. I love everything about that. And so also saying no a lot, right?
Yes,
Saying
yes,
no to the things that didn't feed your spirit, right?
yes.
Yes.
Yes, it hasn't been a lot, but I have fired clients
Hmm.
because life is too short. Life is just too short. And when I worked at other agencies, I mean, I always, for some reason, got the most difficult clients. And it was exhausting, but they would hold on to their clients because of the revenue. And I'm very fortunate that we're in a position where if we needed to say adios, we
We
could
could, yeah.
because of the mental stress
Yes.
that sometimes the money just isn't worth it. And
Right.
I'll be honest, the Boreland Group, we have been impacted because of the pandemic. And one of the things I always say to entrepreneurs is to have multiple streams of
Mhm.
revenue. So we're fortunate in that. And I did sign a client, and after 3 months, I was like, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. And we decide to withdraw from the account, and I've never regretted it because there's just too much going on that when you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about the client and your heart's racing, it's time to say goodbye.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, like I said, as we're wrapping, I wanted you to talk more about that, but what would you like to leave our listeners with?
What I would like to leave your listeners with is that they should not walk alone,
Mm,
that there is always somebody out there who is willing to take the journey with you. And all you have to do is ask, just ask, whether it's professionally or personally. Because what I have always said, if you don't ask, you get 100% of nothing. But if you do ask, you get an opportunity to have 50% of something. And I have asked, and sometimes it's not comfortable, but what has opened up to me has been so wonderful simply because I stepped outside of my comfort zone and made that ask.
love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Absolutely. Well, Jennefer Witter, thank you so much for lending your voice to an intimate conversation with women of color. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Deneen, and thank you for allowing me to be on this program. It was a complete joy.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.